Sound speeds, and welcome to Speed Bumps yet again. Now this episode is a little bit different because I have two cameras running. One is the DJI Pocket 2 running in 4K mode that I'm going to crop in a little bit as needed, and the other one is the Wyze $35 security camera that I used in the previous episode. Now there are advantages and disadvantages. The Wyze can see color at night, so it may pick up what I look like in better detail, even in pitch darkness, pretty much. And the DJI Pocket 2 has better resolution, but will be pretty much black at times. So I'd like your opinion and thoughts in the comments below as to which one you think you would prefer more for this podcast if I have to drive home in a night shoot while shooting an episode. So let me know, because I definitely appreciate your input. Now, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get into our question. How do you deal with keeping the boom mic out of the camera frame but close to the talent? Are there some solutions to this problem? How do professional boom operators keep a microphone out of frame? Ahaha, that is the question, isn't it? But I'll tell you, there is part experience to it. There's part skill, part communication. There's a lot of things that go into it, but let me break it down for you. Starting originally with old school. Used to be that you would have one camera, and it was very easy to just play perspective to that camera. You didn't have to worry about lavalier microphones because whatever was on camera was the perspective that you had to deliver the audio for. When we started adding multiple cameras, you'd have sometimes a wide and you'd have a tight shot, or cameras would split and you'd have to separate it out with multiple booms, or sometimes you'd have to plant something for someone off camera, but whatever the case may be, there were other solutions we had to come up with. But in the original old school type cinema, it was simply you put the microphone out there over the camera in a wide shot and you picked up what you could. Because the audio was actually going to be used for a wide shot was usually flown in as part of what was used in the coverage. So you would shoot a wide shot, might even only shoot a few seconds, and then you'd punch in for coverage. Now we do wides and tights, and they're like, oh, well, I still need to get this in coverage, and they do it multiple times until they finally get what they're looking for in the wide shot and the tight shot at the same time. And even if they get what they want to out of the coverage, they're going to say, oh, well, that's great, let's just keep running the wide shot sometimes. That's when we as boom operators have to shut that down. But the goal here is to get the microphone as close to the frame as possible to get the proper signal to noise ratio. Now, there is such thing as too close. Like if you're doing one of these shots where it basically ends at the eyebrows and stops below the mouth, then you obviously want to give it a little bit of air, because proximity effect works much better when you have a little bit of air on it, at least a few inches. You don't have to like put the microphone right there. It's going to drive them crazy performing with, the camera and the microphone right there. But what you can do on a wide shot is get the microphone close. Now, lavalier microphones are certainly going to help, because when the dailies are looked at, that's the part that you shot that day, whatever they chose to print, is going to be used as visual aid by the producers, by the director, by the DP, and whoever needs to see it, basically, to get an idea of how the show's going to cut together and how their processing looks, how things look and sound. But if you're looking at a wide shot, it can sound like a loose boom. But when you talk about coverage done at the same time, then it's got to sound tight. So most of the time, you're going to use a plant, or your mixer rather, will use a plant, or they're going to use a lavalier microphone if you're doing wides and tights at the same time. And the boom can be used, even if it's a long shotgun microphone, as long as post gets a hold of it early and has a chance to, scrub it and see if they can make it work. But most likely it's going to be just, coverage being used for that, and they'll just, slip it and slide it where they need it to be. But your question is how to keep a boom out of frame. If you start in the frame and then pull out and ask the camera operator to give you an edge or a frame line, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, higher, 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 now that's it. Now you also want to communicate with that camera operator to make sure that you know what their move is going to be and when they're doing it, because if they're going to be tilting up at a certain time, or they're going to be holding a certain the top of a building or top of a door frame or something like that, it's good to know. Now when you put the boom up there and you get your frame line, what you can do is look at something in the back behind them and put the boom, let's say it's crossing a window. At that exact point, don't go lower than that. That's the old school method as to as to, a basic method, I should say, as to how to find a frame line. But most of the time, this day and age, you have other resources. Q-Take is one that a lot of boom operators swear by, where you have the Wi-Fi signal in the air that carries the video feed, and you can look at it on either your smartphone that's on your wrist, or you'll have it on your caddy, which is nearby. You might have it in your pocket and you'll look at it, or, even on a stand in front of you, almost like a focus puller if you want to. It just depends on your particular style, but that should be a feed coming from Video Assist if they happen to have one. If not, it may be another person that's sending it out to the air, in which case there may be a union-related issue there if you're on a union show. But that is one solution also, but it is on the pricey side. You can, if you use your cell phone and they are using Q-Tape, simply get the app and then look at it, provided your battery doesn't fail. You might want to get yourself a standalone monitor or something like that, an old phone that has that you could just leave connected up to a battery all day long, and then use that if you'd like to. Or you can, of course, just use your cell phone, recharge it at lunch or as needed, and go for it that way. Now, that is, of course, a modern solution. I typically don't do that. What I always do is I'm on set, or if I'm not on set and I'm giving them a little bit of room to light by, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I'm watching from the monitors. And I listen at all times to hear what we're going to be doing and when we're going to be doing it. Also, once you do a couple of scenes on a show, especially with a new director, you'll get an idea and a feel for how they like to do things. And at that point, you can pretty much determine that they're going to always hold this amount of headroom. They're always going to hold this much headroom when they do coverage at the same time. They're always going to be doing the wide shot by itself, or single camera most of the time, or they're adding a third camera, or whatever. You're going to be able to figure out the pace of the show and how they're doing it. Now, that is, of course, unless you're working on a big, huge budget visual effects shot or show or whatever. At that point, pretty much anything goes, because it could be on cranes. You could have multiple cameras on cranes. At that point, you could have a steady cam on one camera. You could have 2 cranes. I mean, on Walking Dead, sometimes we had up to 5 cameras, and that was ridiculous. And that was just normal shooting multiple bits of coverage at the same time, because it was crazy when you had Negan and Rick and their guys were, everybody had like 4 or 5 lines or something like that, and you had a 6-page long scene, and you had 12 people talking. Those were kind of ridiculous, but it happened. The main thing is, though, pay close attention to what's going on. Listen after rehearsal when the director and the DP are talking with the operator. The camera operator is basically responsible for telling the rest of the crew on set what the shot is and how it basically goes in, how everything's going to fit together. But usually you're going to hear the DP talk to the director and say, okay, I think we should start off this way. When we get to this, we'll do this, and then this and this. You could pretty much determine how things are going to work out as you go. The camera operator is also a pretty good source for information, as is the first AD, if you don't know what the shot is. But we're talking about keeping the microphone out of frame. So what you'll do is you'll watch what they're doing, how they're doing it, what their lens sizes are, because a lot of the old school people that I know still know how to read a frame. I do have a couple of earlier videos on my YouTube channel here about close but no shadow is one of them. The wider the better, talking about aspect ratio. There's a few different videos I have, and I'll tell you what, I'll put a bunch of cards up here, and I'll put links down in the description down below if you'd like to check those out. And of course, you'll see it in the in frame if you want to watch any of those. But those are some tips that are more old school for how to get a microphone close but yet still out of frame. But what it basically boils down to is paying attention, listening to what's going on. Watching the camera moves is a big one, because camera's going to probably practice a few times. If you're in a fast-paced show and you're just trying to get through the day, then one of the things I will do is I'll say, okay, well, let's at least look at this real quick if I see a reflection or if I see something that concerns me. And that does, of course, mean that if I am concerned about where my microphone needs to be, because if they're holding too much headroom, or or if there's multiple cameras going, I'm going to always watch the widest camera, the camera that's going to be the one that I need to watch for the most. I've only had one circumstance, and that was on a show I did a few years ago, where the tight camera operator kept seeing my microphone because he wasn't framing right. But the loose camera operator, the one that was the wider shot, wasn't, because he was holding proper headroom. And the tight camera, he kept saying, I saw your microphone. I'm like, how are you seeing? I'm like, did you see me in the wide? No. I'm like, okay, so obviously he's not framing correctly, and that kind of thing. But still, the thing is, if they see the microphone, then it's basically your fault, even when it's not. And that camera operator was eventually fired, but not related to that. He was trying to scam. I shouldn't get into that, but he was basically trying to scam himself into an event by using an actor's name who he happened to have a picture with early in the show. So he used that with the media outlets to get into that show. But I digress. Let's not get carried away with that. In short, though, it's not going to be an issue. You're going to be able to figure things out, being very clever, watching, listening, paying attention. Booming the rehearsals is another key one. You really got to make sure you throw the boom out there, and don't, as I was talking about getting your frame line, if you need to do that kind of thing, don't start high and coming in, because if you start wide, they're going to say, oh, I don't see you now, you're fine. That's not what you want from them. You want them to talk you out of the frame and then make them kind of make a decision as to what that frame's going to be. If you start wide, they don't care if you are a foot outside of the frame line, or if you're holding the boom in front of you, like a flagpole, completely out of the shot, and not even throwing it out over the actors. They don't care. They don't see it, so that's all they care about. If the microphone is in frame, then they're going to see it, then they're going to be concerned by it, and that's when they're going to talk you out of it. And then at the same time, they're going to be looking at that and saying, you know what, I'm going to be holding that sign in the background. That's a mental note for them to also hold that frame. So you're going to have a little bit of a leg up there and better chance of staying out of the frame. Constant communication with the camera operator usually works for me. I establish myself with them at the very beginning of the show, make sure I know the operators, I know the focus pullers, I know the dolly grips, and I communicate constantly with them. I'll double check with them to make sure that I know what's going on, especially if they are wearing one of those headsets. The DP is on a headset, the camera operators are on headsets, and the dolly grips are on there. They're going to all communicate to each other, and I won't be able to hear that conversation going on, especially if the operators are on a remote head and not even on set. They're offset someplace, barking orders at the dolly grip who's moving the dolly around, and in the meantime, the DP is talking back to them, changing the shot on the fly, and I don't know what's going on. But what I always tell the operator is, let me know if you are changing something. Let me know what you're doing, and I will make sure that I come to you between takes and ask you. But if there's a change after I've done that, please let me know, or have your dolly grip relay it, because if I don't, I'll be in your frame, and I don't want to be there. I know you don't want me to be there. It just takes communication, and then I'll be out of it. No problem. And so that's basically what I normally like to do. So hopefully that helps. It's a part communication, it's part experience, knowing what to do and when to do it, and how to figure things out. But I'll also tell you this: you'll learn over the course of time that certain width of lens is going to be, if it's low, it's going to hold additional headroom in the shot, but it's actually tighter to the top of their heads because, watch my video right here about understanding camera heights. There's also the same kind of thing, but in reverse if it's high. They'll get to try to probably squeeze down the headroom a little bit, but it's not necessarily always a given rule. There's also other aspects to it as well, like understanding the framing that they're doing on the show. They might hold more headroom, or they might tell you that they're going to be shooting a little bit wider and to stay out of the tighter frame line because they're going to be maybe repositioning in post. It didn't used to happen that way. They used to have good camera operators that they would expect to just nail their marks every single time, and they didn't have the luxury of reframing things in post, so they didn't have to worry about that. It wasn't something that was even an option, so they didn't do it. This day and age, they sometimes like to play God in post and reposition the camera move, maybe punch in a few mils, or maybe punch in a few percentage or something like that and reframe if they need to. But there's various different options they can do in post. But keep in mind also, the aspect ratio of the camera does matter. The wider it is, the tighter the headroom usually is. In the old 4x3 era, or if you're shooting on a movie that has IMAX on it, expect to hold higher headroom. They also might do it for a specialty type situation. If you go retro, for example, for flashbacks, they might go to a 4:3 aspect ratio for a given effect. There's also cameras that will sometimes like a Red camera is really bad about this. There'll be an 8K camera, but they'll extract, or rather print, a certain aspect ratio, which basically looks like if you have a 21mm lens and they extract a certain resolution of it, they may not be printing or recording rather the 8K image. They may be only recording a 5 or 6K image, in which case that 21mm lens might suddenly become like a 35mm. It might look like a 35 or something like that. Also, if you're using anamorphic lenses, that's going to matter too. So the type of lenses that they're using, pay attention to the mils on that. Try to figure out what focal length that they're recording. Not focal length. What length of lens that they're using. Are they using primes or are they using zooms? If they use zooms, try to watch for any time they reach their hand around to the front of that camera, because they could be adjusting that frame, and that's going to be when you get caught. So you don't want that to happen ever, because it will happen and it's not fun. If they suddenly decide they're going to punch in and suddenly you're still 4 feet overhead. Hopefully your mixer's paying attention. They'll say, whoa, they just went tight. Or they're suddenly not going to tell you and they go out 10 mils and suddenly you're in the frame. They say, yeah, we saw you the whole time. What changed? Well, nothing changed. Don't know about that. Because I played the same line that I worked the entire time, but you're not going to argue with an operator. They'll say, usually if they're honest, they're going to say, oh, I widened out a little bit. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. They may not say it in front of the DP, but they'll usually come clean with you and let you know what's going on. But hopefully that gives you some insight as to what to do and how to do it. I do have a boom operator training series, the 3BO series, and I'll link the playlist right here. You can see that this is the very first in the hours of content I have, which is Pro Boom Operator Training, and you can watch that right there on the screen if you'd like. For the pro tips section, I thought I would go over how to properly handhold a microphone. If you're not familiar with it, there's actually a skill behind it. It's not just simply holding a microphone in your hand and flipping it back and forth between people. It's kind of like booming in a sense if you are actually interviewing somebody. The biggest note I will tell you is to do not cover the grill with the microphone. DPA, Danish Professional Audio Microphones, has done a great job of educating on their website. And they do have a link that I put down in the description for you to check out, which talks about the frequency response of different microphones when you do certain things, like if you hold it up underneath the grill, if you completely cover the grill and you kind of channel it more towards you like an interference tube, if you hold it in certain angles, you put a thumb up. It talks about all these different aspects, and you can read it, you can look at the frequency response and how it changes with the same microphone according to how it's held. But what you will want to do is hold back on the actual microphone itself, nowhere near the grill, and lock your hand in position. Don't slide it up and down. Don't slide your fingers. Don't walk your fingers up and down. Once you grab the microphone, hold it. Don't move it. It's very critical you don't do it, because some microphones are going to pick up a lot of handling noise very easily, and you don't want to have that transmit down into your recorder, whatever you happen to be recording on. Another note about how to use a handheld microphone is knowing the handheld microphone you're using. If you're using an omnidirectional, then you very well could put it between you and the person you're interviewing, and that way it's going to be picking up both of you at the same time. If you're using a cardioid in any pattern, technically you could probably do that, but keep in mind that that microphone will sound better if it's more cued towards the person that's talking. So in that case, you need to do this kind of number. And at that point, you need to always make sure you point the microphone at yourself before you start talking and asking your question, and you need to fully point it at the other person after you finish talking. So if I was talking, I would make sure I point the microphone at myself, and then when I'm done, point it at the other person, knowing that they're going to be speaking at that point. As soon as it sounds like they pause for a beat, that's when you take it back to yourself. Don't do a slow, hesitant, I'm wondering if they're going to say something else, because if you have the microphone in front of them, they may feel that they need to elaborate, and you don't want to do that. You want to be very direct with your questions. Ask a short question that will hopefully be open-ended enough for them to answer. You don't want to ask them a yes or no question that takes you 20 seconds to get out just for them to say, yes. That's not really helpful. You want to say, so what did you think about today's event? And then get them, what did you think when this person said this? You know, that kind of thing. But regarding the sound aspect of picking up a microphone, it's very simple. When you hand hold a microphone, don't move that microphone in your hands. It's very easy to slide up and down or something like that, or maybe to shift hands if your one hand gets tired, but you want to keep it back a ways off of the connector, and you want to hold it, very firmly, not so it won't drop, and you want to make sure that you point it leading to the person that's going to be talking next, and cue off of them when they're done. Talk when you have the microphone on yourself, and then when you're done, cue it back. So make sure you're always leading the person with that is going to be speaking next. And of course, there's another aspect too. If you have the option of cueing the microphone away from a noise source, if, for example, you have a loud noise source over there, then what I might do is take the microphone more pointed this direction, so I'm cueing it away from that noise source, and then I'll cue it a little bit more towards them this direction, as opposed to straight at them, straight back. I'll cue it a little bit, just a little bit. It's going to play the pattern ever so slightly. You're still going to get their mouth just fine, even if it's not here, if it's just a little bit off axis and still getting their mouth. Same thing as you do with finding your proper voiceover microphone spot, which I have a video about as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. I definitely recommend looking at the DPA article on their website, because it's quite enlightening when you see what it does to certain frequencies, how it suddenly adds presence, how it suddenly chokes out, will sound boomy, it will not sound like the same microphone depending on how you hand hold it. So keep that in mind and read the article, because it's a great read. So there you have it, yet another episode of the Speed Bumps podcast. And again, I would like your opinion in the comments below as to which camera you liked best. Did you like the camera that you can see me on, even though it's lower resolution? Or did you like the camera that was higher quality, but it's basically dark most of the time with an occasional little sliver or something like that? And we'll see what wizardry I can do in post to at least make you be able to see something. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do, but I'm going to definitely try in post to brighten this up a little bit, enough for you to see. Who knows what that's going to look like at this time, but hey, it's going to be fun to try. But regardless, I would like your opinion about this, and so please write it in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in this episode of the Speed Bumps podcast, and be sure to tune in again next week for yet another episode where I answer your questions, bring you more pro sound tips, and as always, sound advice.
Alan wants all this copy in 20 seconds. Go. If you'd like to ask a sound-related question to be answered in a future episode, send text, audio, or video to ssp@soundspeeds.us. If you want to record this outro, the details are in the description below. You can find Alan on social media and online at www.soundspeeds.us. Oh, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more sound-related content. Phew, have a second left.